coming down. I never left it on the ground. I'm not coming down. I want to go higher, higher, higher than this.
Hello, this is Rebecca Fleetwood Hessian, host of the Badass Women's Council podcast. I'm glad you're here. So today we are going to talk about what I've heard, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to edit that out because life's not perfect. Today we're going to talk about what I refer to as soul food. And it's this idea of being intentional about what you need for yourself. And I have found that we're not great at it, to be honest. I've worked really hard to get good at it over the years, but it's not something that comes naturally to us badass women. And I have an amazing guest on today, Petro, who is the owner of Dropleaf, which is a marketing company who I love the way her website reads. It says equal parts strategy and heart, human to human marketing for the win. Jen likes to work with those companies that are very passionate, mission-driven companies. And when we met for the first time, she shared with me that she has a yearly practice that she takes a retreat by herself to really look at what soul food does she need and to be intentional about it. And as you listen to this interview, that's the thing I want you to really pay attention to is how intentional this practice is and what kind of huge return on that investment there is available to you. So you may like reading things about self-care, which I have a little bit of a rant in there about self-care because I think the whole, bath bombs and rosé crap is not really self-care. To me, that's more, I'm escaping the reality of my life with some booze and a bath. Not that I haven't done it. I'm not judgy about it. I'm just saying that it's not really soul food. It's not healing a lot of times. It's just escaping. And so Jen has a very different take on this that I think you're gonna love. And there are two things coming up at the end of the episode that you're going to stay tuned for. One's a freebie and one's a really cool offer. If you have any intention or interest in starting your own business, Jen has a really super duper cool 12-week class that she does. And she's going to offer y'all a pretty significant discount. But there's also a really cool freebie. Stay tuned to the end. Hey, Jen, how are you?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Super good, especially since you're here.
Yay.
And you know what's fun about this? I have Jen Petro with me today, and we'll introduce her in all kinds of ways. But I was just getting ready to say one of my favorite people, and I've only known you for like 12 days.
A hot second.
We've only been in each other's presence like 2 hours total, maybe.
It does not feel like that, though.
Isn't that interesting? Before we even get to the topic today, I think that's an important thing to say out loud to people because sometimes when I'm with clients and I'm talking about women and relationships and things, they'll say to me, I don't know, it takes a while for me to trust women. I'm like, well, those might not be the right women.
That's right. That's right.
Because I've only met you once in person and you're in my closet already. Like there's total trust here. You're in the podcast closet.
I love it. I'm eyeing a jacket over there that I would love.
Well, we'll have to talk about some swaps before you go. So the real reason we came to talk today is, well, anything we want to talk about. This is my damn podcast.
Love it.
So when we met, you shared with me that you have a practice that you do as a part of your life because you're busy. You've got kids, young kids, you run your own marketing business, your life is super full, and you've adopted a practice that I also love that I want to talk about today. Tell us about your private retreats.
Ooh, I get so excited talking about these and it makes me want to go on one right now. So I started a few years ago taking personal retreats. And just to clarify, I mean solo personal retreats, because I think often people hear that phrase and they think group retreats.
Yeah.
I know there are some great kind of corporate retreats out there, but I mean going away somewhere by myself. Doesn't have to be far away.
Now let's pause.
Yes.
By yourself.
Alone. Yes.
Because half of our audience just went, oh, that sounds amazing. And half of them went, are you crazy?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's key. That's so key.
Yeah.
So I started 3 years ago. I'm planning my 4th one right now, and I will never look back. I think it's one of those, there are so many things in life that until you do it, you don't realize how much you needed it. I wish I would have started 10 years ago. It felt like...
I just said that to the Badass Women's Council group that we meet once a month. I said to them, we didn't know how much we needed each other until we had each other for this last 18 months.
Exactly.
And now there's no way you can take them away from me. Like,
Exactly.
I will fight you for them.
Oh, it's non-negotiable.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a complete non-negotiable in my life right now.
So, so that's a key point, though. You didn't know you needed it. Now you wouldn't give it up. So what was the catalyst that had you take the first one?
I would say crisis, actually, which...
Why, as women, does
But
it
don't
always
wait to- yes.
end up being, well, I was in a place of great pain and crisis, and so I decided to change my behavior.
I always encourage women, don't wait. Do not wait until you're going to have a total breakdown to go on a retreat. But no, I had read for years in leadership books and productivity books and things, the power of going on a personal retreat. And so I knew it was
the concept wasn't new.
I knew that it was
You
something
didn't
that,
run. You didn't literally run away from home where people couldn't find you.
No.
Like you knew you were going on a
I
retreat.
thought of that, though. No.
I did that, actually.
You did.
That's a different podcast. When I was 18, I ran away from home. Okay, we'll talk about that later.
Story later.
Keep going.
And so I had, it was on my radar, but I think deep down I felt like that sounds amazing, and clearly it's helping these CEOs and leaders flourish, but that's not for me. I have 3 little kids. I don't have the budget to do this kind of thing. And so I think I had ruled it out. I'll wait until my kids are older. I'll wait until my kids are out of the house. How many times do we say that, right?
Okay, so every keynote I do, every coaching client I have, every engagement, I always end up saying these words. The biggest lie that we tell ourselves is, when I get caught up, I'm gonna.
Yes.
And then all the things that in your mind you fill in the blank with are the things you should be doing.
Yes.
It's a lie and a trap.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think I had ruled it out and sort of forgotten about it. But went into a season of life that was just heavy. My husband was in the middle of a medical crisis. We had 3 little kids. We have 1 kiddo with a life-threatening medical condition. I was the sole breadwinner. I mean, it was just crazy pants.
Any one of those could send any of us over the edge. Yeah,
exactly.
The combo pack is daunting.
And so I don't remember the exact moment. I wish I had a great moment story. But I mean, just being in that season, I realized I have to get away. I have to. I just knew that I needed to. It was a lifeline. It was going to be a lifeline. And I needed some time to think clearly, because you can't think clearly in the middle of chaos.
Right.
You can't dig deep on stuff. It's really hard to reflect and plan and dream and relax.
Well,
so, yeah.
And in the middle of all that, as badass, high-achieving women, we care deeply about all of those things in our lives, right? And for you to recognize that this was going to be how you were going to take care of all of that better by disconnecting is counterintuitive, but the most important thing ever.
Right.
Because I can think of a million times in my life, and I know all the folks that I work with, we white knuckle it through things, and we think we're sticking with it when we're making it worse.
Absolutely.
Because what we need is a break.
Absolutely. And I knew that if I went underwater, I knew that if I lost it and unraveled, that I wasn't going to be able to help anybody.
Right.
And I needed to be there for my entire family at that time specifically. And so I knew in my gut that it was something that was going to be helpful and critical, not just like a luxury. Because I think so often as women, we look at these things as indulgent.
Oh, yeah. Let's just talk about, quote, I'm doing air quotes right now on my podcast, quote unquote, self-care.
Oh,
if one more person calls that bath bombs and rosé, I'm gonna poke somebody in the eye with a fork.
Yeah.
Like, number one, I hate rosé. There's something bad about that. It just makes me feel stabby.
And I hate bath bombs. So
okay, there we go. But self-care is not about indulgence.
No. We have I'm working with a client right now. She's fantastic. And she talks a lot about how twisted our view of self-care is. And she talks specifically about how we think of things like mani-pedis and massages and Starbucks and dining out, which are all great things. I love all those things. Yeah. So I'm not knocking any of those things. But if you look at the return on investment on that kind of self-care, and the amount of money you're spending on it.
Yeah.
You know, you look at a retreat and you spend a couple hundred, I mean, you can do it big, you can do it small. And I talk a lot about how you got to start where you can with what you have. And we can talk about that if you want. But, you know, you don't have to spend $1 million. And the amount of money you spend doing those other quote unquote self-care things.
Right.
And what's the return? They feel great in the moment.
And there
yeah.
have been times in my past where a girlfriend will have invited me for a mani-pedi day, and what she really wanted to do was sit beside me in the chair while I was trying to relax and bitch about her husband. I'm like, this is not relaxing for me. No. So if you show up for indulgent activities with the same head trash,
yes, love that.
Then that's not gonna cut it.
And what's the long-term gain?
Right.
You know, how are you really filling your soul here?
Right.
So yeah.
Well, and you had I don't know if you realized, a bullet point-ish list of the reasons you were doing it. So rest was the last one on, when you said it, just stream of consciousness, rest was the last one that you mentioned. The first two, I don't remember the first one. The second one was dreaming. And like, do you remember now if you go back and think about why you did? Isn't that funny? I wish I would have captured it.
Which is so funny that I said rest last, because when I structure my retreats, rest is the first thing. It's the first thing on my list.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. But
and I'm going to go there because we've talked about this in our last meeting. It's the first thing that you really want, but it's really the hardest to get when you get there. But we'll come back to that. So when you're thinking about, let's say somebody is listening right now and thinking, oh, I might want to do that. And you were very careful to say, you know, meet yourself where you are in terms of budget, time, all of that. So it's really not about where you go, how long you go, or how much you spend.
Right.
And I love this approach because everything that I write about and care about is being intentional.
Yeah.
So the intent of a personal retreat, a private retreat, is rest, rejuvenation. It is what self-care was supposed to mean.
Yeah.
It's being with yourself long enough to study your thoughts, to study your current behaviors and ask yourself what needs maybe to change, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So tell us a little bit about the process, especially the first one. Tell us through that story.
The first retreat that I took? Oh, so like I said, you do have to start where you can with what you have. And so I don't want the women to ever just say, like, I can't do this. Even if that means taking 3 hours and going to a coffee shop alone and getting a sitter, or taking a nursing baby away overnight with you, whatever you have to do. And there are ways to do it really budget consciously. But I couldn't go very far away the first time. I needed to be close to home. I couldn't spend very much money. And but I needed to do it. So I went to a local bed and breakfast that literally I could walk to from my house. Literally, I could have walked.
Oh, we didn't talk about. I love that. So you're not disconnected so much that if there was an emergency, because you had a lot of health issues and things going on,
I needed to be close.
You could get home if you needed to.
I could run home.
Oh, that is brilliant.
Yeah. So, but it felt like another world. I had never been to this place. It was beautiful. You know, and I was alone, and so it felt like I was far away, but I was 5 minutes from home.
That's brilliant. But I'm sure there was a conversation at home that said, here are the only reasons to call. So what was that when you said, hey, I'm going to take this retreat?
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing I hear from women is even if they want to go with girlfriends to something for work or whatever, they say, you know what, I have a lot that I've got to just check in with others, whether it's budget or time away or whatever. So what was that conversation like when you said, hey, I think I need to get away?
Yeah, with my husband, you mean? Yeah. I mean, he was super supportive. And I think once he heard specifically what I wanted to get out of it, because I do think you have to go into it very intentionally, and it's going to look a little different for everyone depending on what you really need in that season. There are some best practices, and I think there are components that make a great retreat, but you really do have to go into it thinking, what do I really need? What does my soul really need right now? And so I think when Paul saw the intention behind it, and I really showed him, like, here are the things I'm going to be working on, here are the questions I'm working through, here's the whatever, you know, just really laid some things out for him so that it didn't just seem like, oh, I just need to go sleep in a hotel down the road, which actually was part of what I needed.
Yes.
But I think once he saw the thought that was being put into it and that it was equal parts strategic as restful, then I think he made more sense to him. So
I'm kind of tearing right now because I'm writing right now about soul food. And you just spoke exactly to
Yeah.
what I'm trying to articulate and what I'm writing about is
Yeah.
we are high achieving strategic women.
Mhm.
However, we don't often enough
Mhm.
use those strategic powers and turn them on ourselves to
Yeah.
say, what do I need right
Absolutely.
now? So I'm like
Absolutely.
weepy
Yeah,
as you say
I
this
love it.
because it's so
So true.
important.
Yeah.
And
It's
there's so many people that are
yeah.
just craving it and don't know
Yeah.
how to ask for it and don't know how to
Mhm.
just turn all of those special powers that we have
Yeah.
inward.
Yeah. There is a phenomenal little book called Gift from the Sea by Anne Morrow Lindbergh. Have you heard of that?
No.
So Charles Lindbergh, the aviator back in the
Oh,
day, it was
yeah.
his wife. And it's a beautiful little book. And in it, she goes away to the sea by herself on a regular basis. She would take these little she lived on this tiny little like cottage on the beach by herself for months at a time. And she would talk about how women have to have solitude to find the true essence of who they are, to really get to the core of who they are. And she talks a ton in that book about, and it's very poetic. It's a beautiful book,
It
but
sounds
it's
beautiful.
so true. It speaks to exactly what you were just saying. So you have to read it.
And how often do we feel like we can do that?
Mhm.
And that's a trap too. And
Yeah.
it's one that I believe wholeheartedly from personal experience and the clients that I work with that we've trapped ourselves there.
Mhm.
It's not even where someone else has said you can't have time alone. We
Right.
have trapped ourselves there by thinking that we are the center of controlling all of our universe.
Right.
We do not control our universe.
Mhm.
In fact, that perspective in and of itself is what's hurtful not only to ourselves, but to others.
Mhm.
Because when we don't let the others in our lives step up and use all of their gifts and talents,
Mhm.
we've just robbed them. But we don't see it that way.
That's right.
We see it as love and let me help you. And it's not malicious intent, but it's kind of this dysfunctional, I
Yeah.
call it the hairball that we got to
Yeah,
kind of
that's so true.
pull apart and understand that if we feed our own souls
That's
in
right.
those quiet places, we show up so much better.
Right. And there's so many analogies that are, they feel a little cliche. We hear them so often about the pitcher. It has to be full so that you can overflow. And
Yes.
the reason there's so many cliches out there is because it's so true.
Because it's true.
It's absolutely true.
Somebody said that about tribes to me the other day.
Yeah.
She said, I'm so tired of the word tribes, but you can't argue with it because it's important. So I guess I'm just going to keep going with it. But it's true
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
there's cliches because we
There's
need
a
it and it's
reason.
accurate. So you had the conversation, you knew what you were going for. You show up at your bed and breakfast.
Yep.
So tell us the rest of the story.
Yeah. Well, I'd never done it before. So there was a little bit of just feeling, I don't want to say nervous because you're alone, but just, this is weird.
Mhm.
What does this look like? And there's also that part of, oh my word, this is amazing. Like I literally laid out on the bed like a dead fish and just like, this is gorgeous. And so there was definitely
the bed that someone else had made before you got there.
Yes.
It smelled really good.
It was amazing. And so, but I think I shared with you when we met the first time that the first 24 hours, and I did 2 days, and I think 2 days is actually a great, 2 to 3 days, I think is an ideal amount of time. But I call the first 24 hours like the chill the F out time. Like literally, it took me almost 24 hours, which I did not expect this, to just chill out and relax and not feel like completely wound. I didn't realize how wound I was and how on edge and just high alert, And I think part of that comes from being in crisis. We were in hard situations, but also I think day-to-day life does that to you. I don't care whether you're going through crisis or not.
Well, and crisis is a relative term.
Absolutely.
So yours was from anybody would look at that and say, yes,
Yeah.
crisis. But we
Right.
create our own crisis that aren't really so
Right.
much. Like there's not enough poster board for the science fair project if it's 9 p.m. Is
Absolutely.
it really a crisis? But we still have our shoulders up in our ears about it.
Oh, yeah, that's a great way to describe it. And so, and I think, too, being so used to being constantly barraged by other people, by sweet little people of mine and social media and just the noise, right, that we have around us constantly, that being in a quiet space feels freaking weird.
Yeah.
And so I think it took quite a bit of time just to be able to feel comfortable in my own skin and comfortable with the silence and with not being on my phone. And I did have my phone handy, so it wasn't like I didn't take any technology, but I was definitely...
But you didn't go there to scroll on Facebook for the first 24
right,
hours.
Exactly.
That's a key point.
Very
Because
key
that's a
point.
habit. I mean,
Right.
it's a habit I have.
Absolutely.
I travel a lot. First thing I do, when I sit down in the airport by myself is not reflect on things. I
Yes.
find myself scrolling. I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, stop. You have a
Yeah.
minute to yourself.
And you know what's interesting now that you say that? The first retreat was very hard for me to not be on my phone and scrolling things and just those habits you're talking about. But this last one that I just took in the end of November and early December of this past year, it was fascinating because I stayed in an Airbnb and the woman right next door who owns it said, "Hey, I've got the hotspot anytime you need it." I said, "Awesome. I'll be over at least once or twice probably to get the hotspot." And I never went over and got it. I had no
Good
desire.
job.
It wasn't even a desire. It was like I got lost in all the other things I was doing. I was so thrilled with that.
And this is, okay, I'm going to give some nerdy neuroscience
Ooh, I
because
love
I've
it.
spent a ton of time studying the brain and why we do what we do.
Yeah.
Because it all starts there, right? In our mindset and our thoughts. You have rewired those neural pathways of habit. So the back part of our brain is where our habits lie, where we don't have to remember. Nobody has to tell us to brush our teeth, unless you're my 21-year-old son. He might need to be told still. But you just have those habits, those things you do on autopilot. And in that front part of your brain is that prefrontal cortex where we make decisions, strategically plan. And it's taxing to be in that prefrontal cortex. It's harder. And so you've paid the price to realize that the reward of not scrolling and checking is so valuable by making that hard choice. Because the first year it was hard not to do it, wasn't it?
For sure.
And now you realize that the benefit is so great that now it's just a habit that you go, you know what? I don't need to do that. Like you can rewire your brain. You should rewire your brain because we've all got habits that aren't serving us well.
Absolutely.
So you're enjoying the benefit of that hard work on the first one.
Absolutely. And even if from what you're saying, I'm sitting here thinking the retreat itself is now a habit. Because I've seen the benefits and I've seen, so I crave just like the habit loop formation, right? Like I have got that reward. I know the reward of doing one. So I love that. Yeah.
So after you rested, and when we talked about this, it brought up a memory of mine. I have this desire. There's a place in California where you can go spend a week with monks in silence, which people who know me well, I have a podcast for crying out loud. I like to talk. They look at me like, I can't imagine that you would. And I'm like, I will do that someday. But what the research says is that when people get there, they sleep for almost 24 hours straight. And exactly what you said, that they're not anticipating that that's going to be the response.
Yeah.
So after your body kind of reset a little bit and you got some rest and you're 24 hours in, then what's it like? Then what's on your strategic plan?
So usually after the rest kind of phase, it sounds formal, but I guess it's really not. Once I feel like I've rested in such a way that I can do some other things. And that could be different every year, right? It took less time the second
See, because I'm already saying to myself, okay, so on your agenda,
I love agendas. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. I love agendas.
What time did you begin the strategic planning phase?
I know.
That's part of what we are letting go of, right? So once your body felt like,
and I think you know. I mean, I think you know. And I think often you go into that initial period not knowing what you need to get out of that, if that makes sense. Like, for example, this very past one, as I was doing the rest part of it, right, and just relaxing and trying to just get recentered, I realized through part of that, just being still, and that could be different for everyone. That could be prayer, meditation, whatever that looks like. But I always encourage people to incorporate things like that. But part of mine was grief. I have a friend who's been diagnosed with something terrible, and I didn't even realize how much I needed to process that. It wasn't like on my agenda at all to spend time grieving, but that just naturally came out of that first 24 hours this last time.
And that prayer meditation part, don't leave that out.
Exactly.
All you at home who are taking notes on this thing, because when we're talking about rewiring our brains for better habits, it doesn't happen always by very rarely does it happen by just replacing one activity with another frenetic activity. The key is the silence and the stillness and the peace that brings. So then what you need will surface.
Absolutely.
That's huge.
Absolutely. So I always encourage people to kind of listen, be still and listen for what your body needs, what your soul needs, what, if you're a God believer, what God has to say to you and that sort of thing. So anyway, I wanted to share that because I think that's an important part of the rest part.
Really important.
After that, I'm really moving into reflection. So that's where I look back at the year prior. I try to do these like at the end of a year and moving into a new year. And so looking back, what were the highs and lows? I had never taken time ever. It sounds so novel, but it's such an easy thing to do, to really sit down and be thoughtful about what were the high points of the year prior and what were the low points and why. Why were they highs and lows? And I think we're just so busy going through life. Who has time to do that, right?
And the why is key too, because it's what was the purpose behind it? Even the low points, what am I supposed to be learning from that?
Yes.
And the high points, what's the intent and purpose? How can I get more of that?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think often we have skewed views of reality or how life was, because I remember going into this last retreat being a little disappointed with some things in 2018. And, I wanted to do more or achieve more or whatever it was. There were certain areas where I was like, man, I thought I would be further along in that. And as I did that high-low exercise, and I literally went through my calendar because I had not been journaling consistently or anything, which I think would be great to be able to go back to journals and look at that. But I literally looked at my calendar.
Oh, and I want to come back to the journal thing too, because that's key.
That is key.
And we don't forget. I'm sorry, we do forget.
Yes.
Sometimes I can't remember what I did yesterday. Right? So you went back through your account to remind yourself of the highs and lows.
I did. And I made a list, right? And after I looked at that list, I was like, I kicked ass last year. Seriously. Like, what? Why in the world was I beating myself up? And not just I was being funny. I didn't just kick ass, but really amazing things happened.
Yeah.
Amazing things happened. Not
but we
just through
bury
my own
those
efforts.
under busy and under some of the bad stuff. And we forget to raise them back up and be like, check that out.
Completely changed how I felt about last year. Like I literally, it was not even the same year I was thinking about. Isn't that crazy?
That's
it
critical.
Was powerful. Yeah. It was powerful.
And that's when I call it soul food.
Yeah.
That's why we do this, is to remind ourselves that we're far more badass than we sometimes give ourselves credit for.
I found it hilarious how much it changed. I was like, what in the world was I thinking? So anyway.
So highs and lows.
Yes. So just reflecting. And so there are some questions that I kind of posed. And I went into this, I did go into this with a nerdy agenda. I am fully nerdy that way. So I had a list of questions that I wanted to work through. And so a lot of those were reflection based, like I mentioned earlier.
Well, everything we talk about here is reflection and connection. So
love it. Yeah.
Keep that up. I love it.
What relationships went well? What relationships were strained? What, just that kind of, what overall, what areas of my life am I feeling uncomfortable or discontent or, all kinds of stuff.
So you went through your calendar to remind you of events, because that's typically what's in our calendar. But you also went to the place of relationships, which are going well, which aren't. That's key.
Huge.
Because our life is really just a combination of relationships that manifest into events.
Yeah.
But we're with people doing things.
Yeah.
And when our relationships aren't going well, it's hard to enjoy other parts of our lives.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
relationships, events, work highs and lows.
Yep. All that good stuff. And just really ponder, that sounds nerdy, but taking time to ponder stuff, which is a luxury.
It's wonderful. Yes.
So that was really great. And then I feel like so it's part reflection and part, I don't know if rediscovery is the right word, but I like the R thing I've got going here. So I'll just keep going with it. I do too. So
the marketing nerd in you is really coming out. I love it.
Coming out here. So thinking about really big picture questions like, how do I fit into the world right now? And in what ways am I contributing? In what ways am I wishing I was contributing? Where are some opportunities for growth? And just all kinds of questions. And again, I went into it with a list. I would never recommend just going into it going, just sit and ponder some questions, right? It's nice to have some structure and it's going to make your time more efficient. And so
and this is a good place to pause and say, because this has been so valuable for you, you're creating a little bit of a retreat in a box kind of thing for people. Toolkit. Yeah.
It should be on the website by the time that this is out there. But yeah, absolutely. Because I did tons of research this past year in particular for my retreat, really wanting to just, make the best use of my time. And there was very few I did not find many helpful resources, especially geared around women taking solo retreats. There's lots of corporate retreat materials out there and ideas for how to structure that. But yeah, I'm putting together like an agenda, sample agenda and a packing list. Like, what should you take?
It's beautiful because we're so busy. If somebody hands me that, I'm much more apt to go do it because I don't have to go through the process of figuring out what it is.
And the reflection questions, I'll share stuff like that because I think that is so key to go into it armed with those things so that you aren't just spinning your wheels. Because I think it's easy and I think that's intimidating. At least it would be for me to go in there going, I don't really know what I'm supposed to be thinking about.
and here's what we do as high-performing badass women. Am I doing it right?
Right.
Am I doing it wrong? Yes.
There really is no right or wrong. And I say that because I think people do. That is a fear.
It is.
For women in particular. And I think also looking at what season of life, I don't care if you're a stay-at-home mom or you're a corporate executive, you're going to need different things out of your retreat. So you have to take that into consideration.
No,
sure.
We joke about it sitting here, but in our quiet places, what spins in our head is all of that.
Yeah.
My podcast was 6 to 9 months late in launching because I wanted to do it right.
Sure.
And then Jen Eads, who we love, who helped me through that process, brassy, broad Jen Eads, she reminded me, this is your podcast.
Right.
Right and wrong, you get to define.
No
and I was
perfect,
like, oh my gosh, how
That's
wonderful.
true.
And the same is true with our lives.
Yeah.
With that retreat, with how we want to show up as a business owner or a mom or whatever. You said to yourself, where do I fit in the world?
Yeah.
I think that's important too, because we are so good at going through our task list and our calendar and our strategic plan and tweaking and adjusting. But you blew it out bigger and said, you know what, this isn't about, can I get more done on my task list next week? In fact, I tell my clients when I'm coaching, I'd love for you to do less better.
Yeah, I love that.
You know, you went and said, where do I fit in the world?
Yeah. Well, I think so many of us have lost our way, or maybe we never really knew who we were. And I think when you add kids into the mix and marriage and busy jobs or whatever your life circumstance is, I think it's really easy to one day look in the mirror and go, who the freak am I? Like, why? What's my purpose?
You know what people say to me when we're coaching? They say, this can't be all there is.
Yeah.
Where you've worked really hard and you may be making a lot of money.
That's right.
You may live in a great house. Your kids are pretty well functioning. You've got a kind of a cool husband if that's what you wanted. But you still think, this can't be it. I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
So through that process, how did that help you answer that or feel differently about that? What was the outcome?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that this past retreat in particular, it was more of an affirmation as opposed to an exploration, which I think I've been in both seasons.
Oh, wait, say that again.
It was more of an affirmation for me this past year than an exploration.
So you started out in the first few exploring you and where you fit.
Definitely.
And now you've moved into the affirmation. You feel good about where you are.
Yeah. And not that I've arrived and I'm at this spot of perfection. And it didn't all come out of those other personal retreats. Part of it is it's just the journey I've been on. So being part of a mastermind and all these other sort of things that I'm doing as well. But this past year, I felt like a lot of it was just, let's look at this path I've put myself on and is it really what I'm supposed to be focusing on right now? Do I have my priorities in line with where they should be? And I walked away feeling really affirmed about that, which was awesome. But I needed that affirmation because I think I even went into it going, gosh, am I really, because we do that, right? You're second guessing yourself all the time. And so I do feel like it wasn't as much an epiphany in that way this year as it was just really solid affirmation.
So this is big. Because in the last 4 years, you haven't made dramatic shifts in career, lifestyle. The thing that has changed significantly is how you feel about the things that you were and are doing.
I would say that's very true. I definitely have shifted some things, but you're absolutely right. There was no major pivot point in terms of career, which for some people, that definitely comes out of retreats. But yeah, absolutely.
But for a lot of people listening, a lot of I want that message to be loud and clear. This isn't always about I'm going to quit my job and move to Tahiti and my best friend's going to braid my hair on the beach.
That sounds great though.
It does kind of sound great. But we get so wrapped around the axle sometimes that we think that's the only way out. Yeah. And because that feels too disruptive and we kind of like our kids or whatever, so we're not going to run away. You have just set the example and the perfect message that I want people to hear, that you don't always have to change big parts of your life. You have to change how you see your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And people say like, who should go on a retreat? And I think, the answer is everyone. Yeah. But the question I think is, do you want to be a better version of you? And that could be a happier mom or a less anxious person or whatever that might be. But I have the desire to always be a better version of myself. And so I think that is key. That's what comes out of this for me. So, yeah.
And it's intentional.
Right. Yeah.
I find that people want me to give them, especially because they know I've taught productivity for years and all of those, checklist and calendar kind of stuff. And they want me to give them the list. I'm like, I don't want you to feel like a robot that has to do the same thing every single week. I just want you to listen to your own heart and soul and be intentional.
Yeah.
So if you want to be eating healthy, you don't necessarily have to go download the latest diet plan. You just have to listen to your body and say, oh, okay, what do I need today?
Yeah.
And if I am reaching for the chips, why am I reaching for the chips? Because sometimes chips are soul food to me.
Right.
I'm not going to lie. Sometimes it's the chips that I need. Just know why you're doing things.
Oh, yeah.
Know why you're screaming at the kids.
True.
Because the chances are it had nothing to do with the kids. It's probably the meeting you had at 2:00 that you brought into the conversation with your kids. Like just be a little more intentional about your choices of mood and behavior and language. So often I find we turn our words on ourselves in ways that are just aren't at all healthy. That's probably a whole different podcast.
So true. And it's just, life just keeps going. And I think, how often do we look back and go, oh my gosh, that happened 6 years ago? I felt like that was yesterday or whatever. Like life just moves. And I think if you don't get intentional, it's crazy. The lost opportunity, life just slips by. And then all of a sudden we look back one day and go, how in the world did I get here?
And I think that's a great place to circle back on calendars and journals and the way that we record our stories. The blessing and curse of Facebook memories. Who hasn't gone through those on this day memories, right? And it's that realization of, oh my gosh, 10 years has gone by. Right. Or it's a hurtful moment that you don't really want to remember from a few years ago, but it's still, to me, is a healthy way to look back on our lives, to celebrate the things that are going really well, and to ask ourselves, how do I not get into that situation again? And I mentioned journals. So when I was in a really tough spot in my life, trying to figure out what my next steps were, actually, God set me down with 2 months of pneumonia to be able to have the reflection time. So I encourage people to take retreats rather than waiting for the 2 months of pneumonia, which became my retreat. And I know that sounds crazy, but as Brene Brown talked about her spiritual awakening in her early TED Talks and books, this was my spiritual awakening. And one of the things I did once I was confident I was going to live, because the first month was pretty rough, I sat down and forced myself to read through years worth of my journals. And it was so eye-opening, the good and the challenges. And so it was no longer just about what I was feeling in that moment that felt painful. I could look back over years and see the same pain kept showing up again and again. And then it forced me to say, are you going to live that next year too? Or are you going to do something about it?
Yeah, that's huge.
So whatever way you chronicle your life, whether it's you go back through your calendar and you look at events, or you read through your journal, or you just look at a photo album or click through your, of course, photo album. How old are you, Rebecca? Like who does that anymore, right? Your iPhotos or whatever. Just flip back through just to remember great things about your life.
Absolutely.
And the challenges.
Absolutely.
And then be intentional about, okay, so now what?
That's right.
Now what am I going to do?
That's right. And I love what you said earlier about making these little decisions of intention. And I think they're so cumulative and they add up like crazy, and daily little choices to move closer to who you want to be, which I think if you don't take a retreat, it's really hard to know those things. They add up. They're powerful. They do.
My very first mission statement was 1997, I think. And the first line says, life is about choices.
Love it.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah.
I've been reading nerdy books by Dr. Caroline Leaf, right?
Oh,
I read, oh my gosh, neuroplasticity, all these things you nerd out about.
Oh, yay.
Yeah. And it's so amazing to think about how our thoughts actually change our brain. Like they actually change the physical structure of our brain.
Absolutely.
So I love that.
Okay, who is this wonderful woman you say
Caroline
again?
Leaf. Look her up, girl.
Leaf. Okay. I'm on it.
I love it.
That's probably a good place for us to end today, although I could keep doing this for hours and hours. Thank you for being here. And I also want to note, and I'll put this in the show notes and all that fun stuff, but you have an amazing company called Drop Leaf where you do marketing, not just marketing, but you love to work with clients that have a passionate mission. Say something about that really quickly.
Yeah, I love working with companies that are passion driven. They're in it for more than just making a buck.
Yeah.
Yeah, helping them grow and thrive and serve their audiences.
Excellent.
Love it.
And you also have a course that you've created for people that want to launch into their own business.
Yeah, specifically women. Yeah.
Ooh, what's it called?
Yep. It's a 12-week business building program just for women. So it's on the same website. It's all part of Drop Belief Communications, but I love it. It's one of my favorite things to do.
Well, I'm going to put all that in the show notes and make sure that people can get to you because you are fabulous. And I'm so glad that you were here today.
You're a delight.
Thanks.
And I'm not coming down.
Okay, so who's ready to take a retreat? Here's the deal. If you do decide to take a retreat based on this episode, will you give me a shout and let me have you on as a guest to talk about your experience so we can follow up and see if it made a difference? I would love to hear about it. So your reflection questions for today. The first one is, when is the last time you were just quiet and honest with yourself about what you need? Your second reflection question is, what is holding you back from taking that kind of time? What mindset, what beliefs do you need to change to allow yourself to create the space that you need to get some soul food? Okay, so here's your offer. So Jen has created a really cool download on how to take a personal retreat for yourself. And you can go to her website, dropbelief.co, and I will have that in the show notes. And there you can drop in your email address and it will be a download for you. And it is rich. I told her she's crazy. She should have charged for it because it's really, really good. So go in there and grab that and go take a retreat and then contact me and get on the podcast and tell us how it went. How fun will that be? So the other thing that Jen has offered, she's so generous and wonderful and fabulous. She has a 12-week course called 12-Week Business Build for Women. So if you go to her website, or when you go to her website, you can look at the Academy tab and it tells you all about the course. It's all online and it's, again, really, really rich. And she's offering $97 off of that course if you use the code BADASS. So if you're thinking about starting a business or you've just started a business and you just want some extra support, she's great and so abundant. So $97 off, code BADASS. Thanks so much for being here today. Until next time.
I'm not coming down. I never left it on the ground. I'm not coming down.